How's it going, guys? Welcome back. All right, we got some good stuff for you tonight. I say tonight. It's tonight for me. It might be morning for you. You might be mowing the yard. Who knows? I wanted to thank everybody again. I if you want me to stop saying it, I'll stop. But thank you to all the ones that are reaching out and listening to the podcast, and it has grown so much in the past weeks. It has grown, and sorry, my son's trying to come in right when I press record. Seriously, oh man, yeah, this is real life, guys. And I'm gonna leave that in. I'm not gonna edit that out at all because it's perfect. This is life in your face. Here we go. So anyway, getting back to what I was trying to say. Thank you guys so much for the support, for the love, for the listens. This is a work in progress. I'm working on it every week, and I hope it's getting better and better and better each time. That being said, if you have any issues, anything that I need to tweak, work on, go from there. It's getting hot, so I might have to start doing these at night. I'm doing them in my shed, and it gets really warm in there. So don't know, if the AC it's not on. So we'll see how long I last before I die of heat stroke in here. Anyway, no, I really appreciate everybody and all the love and support. I'm gonna go down Grifter Alley a little bit. Please follow me on Instagram, on Facebook. I'm doing a YouTube-y thing, posting up some videos and stuff now. Don't judge me, please. It sucks. This is hard. This is hard work. I'm a very anti-social person, and having to be social because I really want this whiskey stuff to take off for me, obviously. And that's not the reason I'm doing the podcast. That's mainly for me. Somebody wants to hear me. Great, cool. You know what I mean? That's kind of the thing. I'm talking anyway, so might as well talk to somebody that wants to hear me. And that's the thing. You don't have to listen to every episode if you don't want to. It's fine. I wish you would. I wish we could. Why can't we be friends? No. But yeah, no. It's super fun. So today we're gonna get into. It's gonna be a long topic. It might be 2 episodes. I don't know if I'll do them back to back. I'm kind of working. It's kind of a work in progress. We are going to get into, and we're going to get into it right now. We're, right at 2.5 minutes in, and we're getting into it already. So no housekeeping. Sorry, guys. We're going to get into distillation. Yeah, I said it. Distillation. We're going to talk about the ins and outs, what it means, what it is, how you do it. What? No, you can't do it. Can you? No, you can't. Let me preface all of this by saying distillation without a license by the state is illegal. And I don't mean a permit for fuel gas. It is illegal in the United States of America to distill. 100%. Don't do it. Okay? I got that out of the way, didn't I? Okay. Now let's get on. We're going to talk about distilleries. We're going to talk about what they're doing. We're going to talk a little bit about moonshiners and what they're doing or what they did. I'm not going to go too much into history of it because there's so much history, right? I could bore you with the details of the history, right? So we're not going to go there. I mean, we're going to go a little bit. I don't know dates. I don't know all that. I don't have my books with me to reference. Sorry, tongue twisting. So we're going to start at the beginning, and then we'll see where our time goes. And if we run late, I'll wrap it up and we'll finish up. And why are we even talking about distilling? This is supposed to be about whiskey, right? If you're the whiskey shaman, you should be talking about whiskey. Well, whiskey, is distilled, so you have to know how it's made. In order for you to know it, you have to look at what goes into making it in order to appreciate what's in the bottle, right? So I feel like this is like a back to basics for everybody, and it's a refresher for me. So, like I say, this kind of topics are not for everybody, but they, for the select few that want it, it's here, and it's kind of a thing that I can look back on and be like, okay, I talked about this, we went through this, and then y'all can say, I'll reference other episodes, and you can go back and listen to, the what is whiskey and or whatever, what's the difference between the whiskeys. We've already gone through that. So I'm trying to give you an order to where you can just kind of say, hey, go listen to this one, go listen to that one, and have everything on the table. And then we'll start doing reviews, and then we'll do distillery dives. And, we're going to get into a whole bunch of cool stuff, but I got to get the basics out of the way for y'all. So that we can get in. Not that it's going to get more fun. It's going to get more fun because I'm going to start recording video, doing all that stuff, having guests. I really want to have guests. I'm just not set up for it right now, I'm working on it. And if that's something y'all want sooner than later, let me know. DM me. Let me know. Leave a comment. Make sure you like and subscribe, please. It helps the algorithm on everything. All right, let's get into it. Let's kick it. Kick it? Really? Oh my God. 92 or what? Anyway, what is distilling? Well, distilling is taking anything. You can distill water, right? You boil it. You collect the vapor because, any liquid that when you get it hot enough, it vaporizes, and then you cool it back off. And that is called distilled, vapor distilled. Okay. They have water, everything, anything you can think of, right? Alcohols, all different alcohols, vodkas, gins, all that stuff is distilled, right? Beer is not, wine is not. You distill beer, it becomes whiskey. You distill wine, it becomes brandy. Okay, you see where I'm going there? Okay, so distillation started. There's records of distillation in Babylonian times. They found old copper pot stills. They found, big jugs where they would make distillate. And a lot of times it was bitter herb distillate for like medicine. So they would take all these bitter herbs like mugwort and, all that stuff, and hyssop and all the local plants that they would use for thistles, stuff like that they would use for medicine, and they would put it in water and vaporize it, and then use that as a tincture to use as, like cough syrups and stuff like that. So it didn't have any alcohol, or sometimes it did. Sometimes they knew they made wines and beers and stuff like that, and they would distill it with that, and they would give the alcohol as well. And that's kind of where absinthe gets its not roots, because it has its own path, and I want to go down that path a little more, but that's a totally different podcast, I think. Unless I can get Alan Bishop on here and we can talk absinthe all night. But so the art of distillation is basically, we're going to talk whiskey, right? Because we're whiskey. You make a mash. So we've learned about a mash. It's grains that you like. Let's say we're going to do malted barley. It's the easy. I'm going to make it this as easy as possible for you. You get the malted barley. It's already been malted, so the sugar is available. The starch has been. Yeah, we have to convert the starch to sugar, right? So we mash that. It has enzymes in it already because it's been malted. So you put it in a big pot of hot water. Some people say 155 degrees, some say 148. It just kind of depends upon what you're trying to make. And you let it sit. The way that the enzymes work these days, you have full starch conversion in 15 to 20 minutes. Most people wait an hour, sometimes more. And then you take whatever that is, that the water that's in there. Let's say you're making 100 gallons, right? You're making 100 gallons. You take whatever grain that's in there, blah, blah, blah. You let it mash. You crush it, obviously, so that the enzyme can be activated by the water. Have you ever made like oatmeal and you forgot to stir it, right? It turns into a big dough ball. Yeah, I mean, I don't know who does that, but it's a thing. You have to be able to get in there and mix it up and stuff. Anyway, and then most people take a reading of it to see how much sugar is available for the yeast. The yeast come in and they eat the sugar and they create alcohol, CO2, and a bunch of, acetaldehyde and all kinds of other esters and stuff. So that's why, like, when distillers pick yeasts, they're very particular about, like, some use wine yeast, some use brandy yeast, some use beer yeast. It just depends upon what your flavor profile is and what you're trying to do. So you put your yeast in there according to however much you have, and then after you get your gravity reading first, right? So your gravity reading is going to tell you how much available sugar is in there. So let's say it's a lot of people use the brick scale. This is way too geeky. I'm sorry. They use the brick scale. A lot of other people use specific gravity, which is basically the density. It's not really dense. Anyway, the amount of sugars that's in that water. And they find the reading, whatever it is, 80 points, right? Whatever that is, right? And then they okay, we know we have a potential alcohol of 10%, whatever, okay? 12%. So then they pitch their yeast, whatever their yeast is of choice, and they let it ferment. So the yeast creates CO2, it farts out CO2, it eats the sugar, turns it to alcohol, right? Then once it's done, once it eats all the available sugars, it settles to the bottom, and that you have your beer, right? Or distiller's wort is what they call it. They don't call it a beer because we didn't put hops in it, right? So it's not a beer. Beer doesn't have to have hops, by the way. Anyway, all of them do, but they don't have to. Barley wines don't, but it's not a beer because it's a wine. Anyway, and then after it's fermented, it can take anywhere from three days to 2 weeks, depending upon how your conditions, heat, pH, all those things matter. It turns into a mad scientist type thing, and the rest of this is going to be pretty mad scientist, and some alchemy and some whatever. But so once you get that and you have your beer, then you're like, okay, now I need to get the alcohol out of that beer, right? So you put it in a pot. Some people use copper, some use stainless steel. It depends upon the distillery, what they're going to do. There's so many different types of distillation that you can do. There's column, right? So it is what it says it is. It's a huge column. It has a pot with a huge column on top of it with what they're called plates, and they're plated. And they can turn off and on those plates with whiskey, especially because it has to meet certain criteria for it to be considered whiskey. We've already covered that, right? So they turn off and on the plates to get the flavor profile they want. Some of them have 4, 5, 12, 2, it doesn't matter. Each distillery is going to be different. Some of them use a continuous still. And I think we might have talked about this. I don't remember. Still Austin, out of Austin, obviously. They're using a continuous still. And so basically they just pump the beer in there with grain and all, pump it in there, and it instantly vaporizes by the steam. And the steam is injected in the bottom, all the barley falls to the bottom, all the alcohol goes up. And then they find their plate, they open that plate that they want to take that liquor off of, and they're done. Then there's hybrid, which is basically a column still, pot still combo, and you can do both or none. And then there's the pot still, which you've heard me talk about pot still bourbons and stuff like that. The pot still is literally a big pot. That's why they call it a pot still. This is kind of basic, but it's a giant pot, and then on top of it is a dome, normally, and then it has what they call a line arm. And then the line arm, depending upon its placement. So think of it a circle with a onion, we'll call it an onion, on top of it, right? And we're enough to hold this 100 gallons, so it's got to be pretty big, right? And then that onion sits on top, and then on top of that, it has like a elbow, a 90-degree turn, right? and then it goes into what they call the line arm. And depending upon where that line arm goes, some of them go straight, some of them kick down at a 45-degree angle, some of them have a 65-degree angle. It just depends upon the distillery. And so, and that gives you different flavors, right? The more angle you have going down on it, the lighter your spirit is going to be. So I think the higher up, the grungier it's going to be, because it's not going to be able to, it's going to get to that 90 and it's going to go straight down. It's not going to recondense any, it's just going to do that. But if you have it tilted up more, it's going to have a tendency to pool in there and run back down into the pot. So when it runs down back into the pot, it gets redistilled from the hot vapor, right? And so it softens it and makes it, I hate to say the word pretty, but it makes it more pretty. It makes it a prettier whiskey, which means gives a lot more floral notes, a lot more, notes of like orange peel and, things like that. So it makes it a lighter, whereas the deeper you go, the grungier it gets, because you're getting just the alcohol. It's not revaporizing. It's just coming up, boiling once, going down. That's it. Now the onion, we talked about that little onion. That thing will condense and it will hold some of the vapor, and it will recondense on the walls and fall back into the boiler and then get boiled again. So you do have some what they call passive reflux, but you're not going full reflux, right? We're not making vodka here. We're making whiskey. So we want it to be flavorful because we worked to make that beer, right? We worked to make that beer, and so we don't want to strip all the flavor out of it, right? And so, speaking of strip, no, we're not talking about that strip. That first run, when you put the beer into the boiler and boil it off and collect the alcohol off the other end, it's called the stripping run. You're stripping the alcohol out of the beer. Okay, so you're running it, you're heating it up, everything, it starts to vaporize. Well, you need to be able to get not vapor out. You don't want the vapor coming out the end, because that's volatile. That can explode, right? It's alcohol. So you condense it. You have what they call a condenser. Depending upon who's making it, it's a Liebig, shell and tube, shotgun condenser, worm. The old moonshiners, they would have that copper worm going in a big circle. That is a condenser, and basically you run cold water, or some people use glycol, or the bigger distilleries have all different types of chillers and stuff like that they use. You do that, and it condenses the vapor, the alcohol vapor, back into a liquid. Then you collect it. On the stripping run, now this is not all distilleries, only the ones that I've visited, they collect everything, right? We've talked about heads, hearts, and tails, right? We've talked about the bad stuff at the front, the bad stuff at the end. You want to keep that little middle section as the good part. Well, on the stripping run, you keep all of it to get volume, right? So after you do the run, you get down to whatever percentage of alcohol coming off the spout. You end up wasting energy boiling. The boiling temperature goes up. The boiling temperature of ethanol is 173 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know the Celsius, but anyway, you get it. So what they do is they start it there, right, and then slowly creep up the temperature, because the more alcohol you take off of it, the boiling point changes, and it becomes more water in the boiler than alcohol, right? So it has a lower boiling point at the beginning, and then the longer you get into what they call the run, which is the run of liquor, it boils off at different, And so when you first run it, you get the methanol, right? Like we talked about. You don't want that. That's bad, blah, blah, blah. Some distilleries, they'll chuck it out, the first gallon or 1 or 2, depending upon how big their run is. And then, okay, let's say you're done. For the day, you've ran all the alcohol out. It went down to like 4 or 5% alcohol, whatever, 10%, whatever they run it to. Then you take what is in that pot, the beer, right? Now it's called stillage, right? A lot of people dump it. Some people save that back set I said it, I backsaid. They save a percentage of that to put in their next run. Okay, it's called sour mash, right? We've talked about sour mash. If we haven't, I'm sorry. We should have. Anyway, I think we did. Anyway, so then you dump that. It's really not good for anything. It's other than sour mash. It's really pretty acidic. You wouldn't want to drink it. It has no alcohol in it. It tastes not scorched, but it's not great. I got to try some in Andalusia, and I was like, oh, that's not great. It tastes like stale, old, unalcoholic, nasty beer. Yeah, not good. So they normally dump it. And then if there's grain involved in it, they'll take that grain, because some people distill on the grain. So if there's grain in there, normally with single malts, they don't. Like in Scotland, they don't. Everything they distill and ferment off of the grain. Why, I don't know. It's just a preference that they do. Some of the bourbon people say, and most of the bourbon people say, that fermenting and distilling on the grain gives more of that grain character to the distillate, which I can see. So then you have all that grain. Feed it to the cattle. It's a lot more easily digestible now because it's been mashed, it's been boiled, and so therefore it still has sugar in it and stuff, you know what I mean, that the yeast didn't get. And it's very nutritious, for them now, and their body can process it a lot easier. So, the more you know. There you go. So you have your pot. So of the 100 gallons you put in there, you might only have, I don't know, if it was a 10%, you might get 20 gallons, maybe, of what that would be called would be low wines, or low ends, whatever they call them. Sorry, I had to get a little drink. I'm talking too much. That's kind of the point, though, right? I talk. Anyway, so then what they do is we're talking just pot still, right? We're not talking column still yet. We're talking just pot still. So once they have enough to refill their pot, so let's say they have a 100-gallon pot, you don't want to run it with 20 gallons of product because it's going to run out too fast. And if you're open fire or if you're steam injection, you're just wasting fuel. If you're an element, like if you have a heating element in there, you're going to have a chance of getting an exposed element and causing big problems. You don't want that. So you want to have enough in the boiler to put it back in. So a lot of times distilleries will do a number of stripping runs, and then one what they call finishing run or spirit run at the after a couple times when they have enough. So let's say you've done a couple of those, you have right at 100 gallons. You're like, all right, the issue is, and this is kind of a misnomer for some people. Okay, that alcohol that's in there is alcohol, right? So it has an alcohol percentage to it. You do not want to put anything back into that boiler that is over 40% alcohol. That is mainly for safety reasons, right? But also, the higher the alcohol content in the boiler, boiling it again, the more likelihood of you getting phenolic compounds that you don't want in your whiskey, right? So you don't want acetaldehyde or formaldehyde, in your whiskey. That doesn't taste good. You're not trying to embalm yourself. Maybe you are. That's up to you. But you don't want that in your whiskey. So 40%. Some people do 35 just to be on the safe side. It's fine. So you just add water to it. It's really simple, right? So then you stick it back in the pot at 40% or under, and you boil it again. But this time, it's a little bit different because you don't have all that, all the proteins and stuff in that beer. So the boiling point is still going to be 173, but it's going to get there a little bit faster. So you need to watch out. But what they do a lot of times is they'll get it up to a certain temperature, and then just hold it there until they're ready to, maybe they're doing other stuff in the distillery, and then they'll do their run. And then once they do their run, they do pretty tight cuts depending upon what they're making. Like if we're making the single malt, like we talked about with barley, and if you're going to age it, let's say you're in Scotland, I'm obviously not in Scotland, but if you were in Scotland, a lot of those distilleries, like I said in the past, they cut into their tails, which is the lower part of the run, a lot more, because they're going to age them for 12, 15, 20, however many years. So all of those compounds that are in the tails are still very good compounds, but they're mixed with a lot of other things that you don't really want to drink. And if you were to try the white spirit as it came off the still, it would be disgusting. It would not taste good. But in a barrel, the barrel, because it's charred, right, and toasted, well, the char mainly, but the char is charcoal, so it filters out a lot of that. And why do they cut so deep into the tails? Well, there's flavor compounds in there that they want, but they don't want all the other ones, so they have to take the good with the bad. And they're in a climate where that long aging is perfect for them. They can create a lighter spirit, and with more, because they have more time on their hands. Now, if you cut too far in the heads, then you're getting a spiky, acetone, nail polish remover. No, nobody really wants that, right? That's just, and it will age out if you don't go too far. It will age out a little bit, but you're always going to have a little hotness to your, and if that's what you want, if that's what you're going for in your spirit, there's some distilleries that I've been to that they like that. Okay, cool. That's, it's your prerogative. But most people take the heads and they'll take a little bit of the tails and, put it in there. And then they put it in a barrel. Now, we're doing single malt, right? Barley base. So most single malts are put into a used barrel, a barrel that's already been used by a bourbon, a brandy, whatever. They'll dump that in there and let it sit. Now, what's going to happen in that used barrel is it's going to give off lighter tones. It does not have all of the wood sugars and stuff like it did before. I mean, it does. It still has them, but they're not as prominent. Like in a bourbon, you get all those really sweet caramels and vanillas and stuff like that. It's going to be a lot less in a second use, and then in a third use and a fourth use. I mean, they use those barrels till they fall apart sometimes. That's why a lot of scotches, not a lot, but a lot of scotches are like almost clear sometimes. But they say they're 12 years old or whatever. And they use E150. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. But so you make, after you did that run, then you're like, okay, now we make our next batch, right? And you just continue to do that, and you fill barrels. Now, obviously, there's some distilleries like, I'm looking at my wares here to tell you. Look, like Glenfiddich, we're doing single malts, right? Like Glenfiddich, they're a huge distillery, right? Highland Park, huge distillery. Ardbeg, huge distillery. They could probably fill 50 barrels a day, 50 barrels a run, with their hearts, you know what I mean? So the smaller distilleries, they're going to have a harder time, because the smaller your pot, the less yield you have, but also the less beer you're making. So, the less money you're having to spend on grain and all that stuff. So a pot still is just that. It boils it, condenses it, comes out. It is what it is. You get a lot of oil from the actual distillate. You get a lot of the beer, the distiller's beer that you masked. A lot of those flavors comes over, so you're able to pick up on a lot of the malty characters and stuff like that. Okay, so we're good on time. So now let's get into column still. And now this is going to be more like a lot of, now there is some that don't, but a lot of your Kentucky bourbons are going to be low rectifying column stills. I know, I'm sorry. It's super nerdy, super nerdy. Um, Basically, it had all these plates. They set plates in there, and those plates are like, in a layman's terms, it's miniature distillations on each plate. So you have 6 plates. That's like, and I'm not throwing shade at these people. That's like Tito's vodka. It says distilled 8 times. No, it's not. It's distilled twice. The first time is the stripping run. The second time but they have 8 plates. So it's distilled 8 times. So they say. Because you wouldn't distill it 8 times. There's no point in distilling it 8 times. You're only going to get so much alcohol out. You're going to reach azeotrope, and that's it. You're done. 95% alcohol. That's all you're going to get, without doing some, chemistry. But hold on. Man, I've been thirsty today. So I had to buy a new computer. I'm sorry, I'm ad-libbing in the middle, but we went to the big town today, and I tried to get the computer fixed. Went and talked to Apple, the Apple lords, and they said, "Yeah, you're screwed. It don't work. Yeah, I don't even know if we're going to be able to get our pictures off of there or anything." I backed up a little bit to the cloud, but I didn't. They're like, "You need to upgrade the cloud and pay $12 or whatever." I didn't do it, of course, because I'm like, I'm not doing that. It's stupid. Well, now I'm like, well, crap. So we went over. I bought a laptop this time. I wasn't going to get a desktop. That way I can put it in the shed and do some videos. So that's coming soon. Get ready for that. Anyway, back to column still. So basically they just do the same thing that they were doing for the pot still, only it's purifying it a little bit more each time. So now with whiskey, you have to pull it off at 160 proof, right, or 80% alcohol to be considered whiskey. Any higher than that, it's light whiskey, right? Now, if you're making light whiskey, go ahead and go up higher. But light whiskey is getting more and more like vodka, right? So we don't want to taste like vodka. We want to be able to taste the grains and that's the whole point of what we're doing. We're making whiskey. We're not making a gin. We're not doing any of that. So what the distillers will do then is they will just watch it, and a lot of them have, a lot of the big distilleries like Wild Turkey and all those, they're automated by now. They don't have some guy sitting there, filling up a little jar and testing it with his tester and all that stuff. They don't have that. It's all automated now. So it's kind of, the whiskey makes itself, I guess. But so you run it through there, and then you check your purity, and then what they do is they have a cut point. It might be at a certain proof. It might be at a certain time in the run. They do samples of the distillate coming off to check for flavor and make sure they're not getting any weird notes coming out of it. But on the bigger distillers, they just let it run. But I know for a fact that and this doesn't pertain to this particular one, but like Moose over at Andalusia Whiskey, I know I fanboy about them all the time. If you're in Texas, go. It's a great time. They only have a pot still right now. They're working on a Vendome. I'm really excited about it. Vendome's a huge still maker, and they're getting one supposedly very soon. So it's going to be really cool once it's all hooked up and running. Anyway, but he goes and he takes samples off of the still as he's going, and does a little smell, and like if he's doing a peated run or something like that. After you do it a number of times, you kind of know, what to smell for, what to taste for, and he just puts a taste on his tongue. He's not like he's drinking it. He tastes it and says, "Okay, no, it's not ready yet. We're not ready to cut yet," or whatever. But when you're doing a column type still, the alcohol is a lot higher, right? So you're coming off at 180. You might stay at 180 for 75% of the run. Well, not 180. I'm sorry, 160. I'm sorry. So that's 80% alcohol. You're not gonna want to, you're not gonna want to taste that too much. So they mainly do it by temperature and all that stuff. And they have like sensors and stuff in there that says that. But they do. They'll go and they'll sip on it a little bit, just to make sure there's no funky things going on. So what the column still does, like I said, the pot still makes it grungy, dirty. I hate to say dirty because it's not dirty, a lot more. I'm going to say a lot more flavorful. Whereas the column still lightens it, gives it a little. It makes it to where to me, the barrel influence is a little more. I know whenever I have the Balcones pot still bourbon, right? They leave it in there in a new barrel for 2 years, right? And they pull it off. Of course, it's in Texas, so they're going to be fighting the heat and stuff like that. But I taste a lot more of the corn, the barley, than I do with like a Kentucky bourbon. Kentucky bourbon, I taste a lot more of the barrel tannin and like the barrel sugars and stuff. I do taste the corn, the dusty corn and stuff, especially if it's a high corn content. But I feel like that's kind of the thing. Like the oils and stuff that's in the pot still, kind of, they carry over in that barrel, and they kind of protect the over tanning effect. And so I've had some some Kentucky whiskeys that 8 years old, and they're like, woo, man, that's tannic, So you got to kind of gauge it a little bit, but yeah. So they'll take it, and then once they do, they do their stripping run, they do their spirit run, they pull off what they want from it. So let's say we're doing a 100-gallon batch. With that, they might end up getting 40 gallons of product they can use. You know what I mean? You get a lot more yield with a column still, because it's rectifying it more and more and more. So that's one of the reasons they do it. Not they're doing it for taste and stuff like that as well, but they get a higher yield. And so then what they'll have to do, though, is they'll have to proof it down quite a bit before they put it in a barrel, because you don't want to put 75% alcohol in a barrel. You can, but it's just going to over tanninize it so bad, and it wouldn't be called whiskey, would it? Because it has to have a barrel entry proof, right? For bourbon, it's 125. You don't want to go over that, and most distilleries are having lower barrel entry proofs, like 115 or something like that. So so they have to water it down quite a bit more. So they did all the work to get the water out of it, and then they just put water back in it. It's kind of weird, but so yeah, I mean, man, I'm running through this stuff, guys. Wow, that's cool. Okay, let's we might only make this one episode. Man, I'm doing good. I hope you guys are enjoying. It's getting a little warm, but that's okay. Okay, let's talk about moonshiners. I know everybody's seen the show with old Tickle. Everybody's seen that, right? Where do I start? Okay, that show is fake, for one, obviously. Moonshining is illegal. Obviously, it has been. They were doing it back during Prohibition, because obviously nobody could buy liquor because they outlawed it, and so the moonshiners came in to run liquor. But, and this is no shade on them, a lot of the moonshiners were not making great product. They were making what they had. They were mixing a lot with sugars and stuff like that. Again, I've tried some moonshines from distilleries. They are not great, but they're okay, right? So take them for what they are. And then you get into the whole bath salt thing. They were putting all these like poisons in there to make it taste like whiskey when it was actually not, and they were using like denatured alcohol and stuff like that. It's horrible, like killing people. It was bad. Okay, so that gives moonshiners a bad name, right? So what happened, and did you know that moonshiners were the ones that started the whole, they were, they put the moonshiners in, they would make their run, they put it in the back of a go-car, and that go-car would go to the place where it needed to drop it off, and that's kind of what started NASCAR, because they would do it on the beach, and they would run around, and that's what started NASCAR. Pretty crazy, because those guys could run from the cops pretty fast, and they would soup up their cars and, put Smokey and the Bandit type stuff, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, that started what NASCAR is today. Fun fact. I'm full of those fun facts tonight. Anyway, so the moonshiners, they kind of have a different take on it. A lot of what the show portrays is true to what the moonshiners used to do, and I'm sure still do. There's still moonshiners out there, so and there's probably they're still in the backwoods of Tennessee and stuff like that, still doing the same thing they've been doing for generations. And that's what's cool about the whole whiskey scene. Now, moonshine can be whiskey, right? But not all moonshine's whiskey, right? Sometimes it's brandies or whatever. So just understand that. When I say moonshine, I'm not meaning whiskey. I'm just saying a clear spirit, right? So a lot of times because they didn't have, electricity or a place normally, so they'd go into the woods and they would build a fire, build a big old pit, and put their copper pot on top of it, burn wood underneath it. Well, wood, you got to think about an open fire is really hard to manage. If you've ever smoked meat or something like that, it's like fire management is a skill. And these guys were literally like amazing how they could even do this. And they would divert water from the creek, or what they called the crick. They would divert water from the creek to go into their condenser to condense it back down. Like it's so ingenious, crazy. It's crazy the things that they would do. And so a lot of times when they mashed, they would make their own barley malt. They would make their own corn, and they would malt their corn as well, which malted corn gives a cool taste, so that they could get more of that flavor, right? They would give a lot more flavor to it, and then they would subsidize it with sugar, or cane sugar, or molasses, or whatever they had on hand, beet sugar. I've heard a lot of stories of people using beet sugar, and what else? There was something else they would use. Picolina, is that what it's called? Picolina, the Mexican candy. They would get like candy sugar and put that in there, and then they would mash it, obviously, but they would mash it in their boiler most of the time. And they'd come back the next week, it'd be ready, they'd run it. Well, they're doing this in the woods, right? So they don't have time nor the patience to let's do a shipping run, and then we're going to do a spirit run, and I'm going to test it and do all this. They don't have time for that. We got to get this liquor out and get it going. So what they found out is, if they did, let's say they have a 100-gallon pot, right? They're still doing a 100-gallon pot. They would do what they call a thumper, or slobber box, or a doubler. There's a couple names for it. They are a little different, and I'm not going to go into details of those. But basically what they were doing, they would light their fire. Well, guess what? When you have corn and all this stuff in your boiler, it's going to bubble up. It's like making a pot of stew. It's going to bubble and do all that. Well, the vapor, sometimes it'll do what they call puke. And it will actually, some of the stillage will get into the still and try to go down the condenser. Well, if it does that and it gets stuck in there and hardens, it'll blow up, because it's what they call an open distillation. The end of the condenser is open, right? It's open to the air. If you were to close that off, it would be a bomb, right? Because you have alcohol vapor and heat. right? That's a bomb. So if anything was to ever get stuck in there, it'd blow the thing up. So what they did is someone, I don't know who, somebody's going to tell me. I know they will. I hope they will. Said, okay, well, they would use whiskey barrels or wine barrels or whatever, and they would cut a hole in it. They'd run from their line arm. Remember we talked about line arm. They'd run their line arm to that whiskey barrel, put it all the way to the bottom, and put like a muslin or a mesh around it, and then they would have another. Then there would be the barrel. Sometimes they'd put like apples or some of their mash in there, and then on the other one they would have another piece of copper pipe coming up, and it would be sitting, almost at the top of the barrel, but inside the barrel, and they'd seal it all up, and that would be the thumper. And so whenever the alcohol vapor would come over, it would meet that liquid that's in the thumper, and then it would bubble, and so it would go bubble, 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 thumper. Get it? The old moonshiner, Popcorn Sutton, whenever his thumper started going off, he would do what they call the thumper jig. Now, a lot of these old moonshiners loved their own product, if you know what I mean. They were half snockered about the time they started making their run. So he would do his thumper jig, and he said it, invoked good spirits for the run and stuff like that. He was a character. Rest in peace, brother. But anyway, so once that thing starts thumping, it basically redistills it, because it heats up all of that water in there with that hot steam, or all that mash, or whatever they have in there. So it redistills it again. So it's cleaning the product up, like we're talking about. So you're getting more alcohol. So you're basically doing 2 runs in one. Really ingenious if you think about it. I tell you what, those old moonshiners, they knew what the hell they were doing. They knew they had to do it fast. They knew they had to make a good product. You know what I mean? And they knew they had to do it once and be done with it, because they would mash in the same place they distilled. So you got to get it going. You got a week, you're done. And then it would go into the condenser, get condensed back into a liquid. And they do the same thing. They dump it out. They keep what they got. And so when they're making the moonshines, it depends upon what the proof is. It depends upon what they're running, right? If they're running peach brandy or pear brandy or something like that, they might leave it, or they might cut up peaches or something like that and put it in there. Sometimes they would add sugar back to it. They would fortify it, basically. But a lot of times it would just be the clear spirit. Everybody's heard of the apple pie moonshine and stuff like that. That came along a little bit later, when they, not during Prohibition. I don't know if they were doing a whole lot of that. I think that was more the rectifiers that were doing that, and we'll get into rectifiers on another episode, because we're about to run out of time. But yeah, they would run it and gun it, and then they'd send it off to their supplier to get it out to the people who wanted it. And they're still doing that today. And the reason it's illegal for them is because they don't have the license to do it, obviously. And the Fed wants their money, their tax money, period. They're not paying taxes on that. That's 100% free, clear money. Now, they had to pay for the, building the still and all the product that they put into it, but everything else is theirs, 100%. But they treat it like you're selling drugs, obviously, which, that's a whole nother topic for us to talk about. But, yeah, so I'll wrap it up right there. I think that gives us a pretty good go at what the distillation part of it is. I'll think about what I want to name this episode, because I don't want to get flagged or anything. But yeah, no, it's super cool. It gets super nerdy. You start talking about coffee stills, and they're not made for coffee. It's the guy, and then early distillation and what they would do, and different methods that they do. 3-chamber stills, like Leopold Brothers are doing. I mean, there's so much out there you can nerd out on. I'm trying not to nerd out so much so that it's easily digestible for you guys. But anyway, I'm gonna stop right there. I'm dead. Okay. Again, like, subscribe, follow. If you have any things you would want me to discuss on here, shoot me a DM and let me know. Whiskey Shaman, _, Whiskey Shaman, obviously. I can't believe I can't get the other page, but at this point it doesn't matter anymore. So, thank you all for listening. If you stuck around this far, I'm proud of you. That's pretty good. But yeah, no, I appreciate y'all. And y'all have a great week. And as always, keep your spirits up.